If you know what's mindful practice, clap your hands. Hi, I'm Teb Meissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. Today we're going to be learning about how knowing you're doing a mindfulness practice can influence your outcomes. Come on, let's get started. Our guest today is Kira Borgdorf. Kira, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks for having me and inviting me. Happy to be
Yeah,
here.
I've been really eager for this because I've been reviewing, and for those of you who are tuning in, take a look at the link that I have about Kira's work because it's a tremendous laundry list of outstanding research. And we're just going to be talking about one of the papers today. So, Kira, thank you so much for all that you've been doing around mindfulness and compassion. And maybe you could introduce yourself, just say a little bit about where you are, what you do in mindfulness and self-compassion and research in general.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So my name is Kira. I'm a Germany-based psychological researcher, but also lecturer and trainer. And I very recently completed my doctorate at Heidelberg University in Germany. And my research, more specifically, I focus on socio-emotional competence development in adults, and more specifically on the development of mindfulness and self-compassion and their effects and their mechanisms. So particularly, I'm interested in understanding how and when these practices actually contribute to well-being, to mental health promotion, and to figure out how to inform also the design of mental health promotion and prevention interventions. And my work was embedded in a larger research project where we were interested at the in the state development that contributes to long-term trait development. So basically, we wanted to understand at the intersection of personality and clinical psychology how people develop, what are the processes, and we focused on these state experiences and reflections particularly, and I focused on mindfulness and self-compassion in that project.
Thank you. And I'm curious, before we talk about this specific research, what got you interested in doing this kind of work? What brought you into this very wide territory of mindfulness and compassion?
hmm Um, Basically, or the most easy answer is personal interest. I have been meditating for quite some time myself now, and it started during my bachelor's as a method also to reduce stress and to get to know myself better. And I felt a lot of benefit from doing the practices, and then I became interested in it more from a research and science background and understanding as a psychologist as well how can we enhance well-being in people, and that motivated me to go specifically in the direction of intervention research. So how can we offer training to also non-clinical populations to prevent ill-being in society, and how can we offer that in a approachable way to people around the world.
So many different dimensions to what you just shared, and especially this idea of prevention. That it's not just about, I'm already suffering in some way, but here's how, when I'm feeling okay, I can keep that going,
Yeah.
still while encountering difficulties in life. So let's shift a bit. Tell us about this particular research, I'm very interested in some of the aspects to it, but maybe you could tell us just an overview about what it was about.
hmm Yeah, I've been already mentioning these states or momentary experiences. Maybe let's start there. So, you basically assume that when you learn a new skill, you do so by practicing it, right? If you want to learn how to play the piano, you have to repeatedly practice playing the piano. And personality psychology researchers assume the same for traits or personality development. So, if you want to shape your personality, you are probably it makes sense to engage in the behavior that is representative of the trait that you're trying to shape. So if you want to become more extroverted, it would make sense to show behavior that is more extroverted, for example, to talk to people you don't know or attend social events. And the same holds for mindfulness. So if you want to become a more mindful person or more self-compassionate person, it makes sense to probably practice some of this behavior or meditations to get there. And in this study, we looked exactly at this assumption. So the idea that repeated momentary experiences that we have during showing these behaviors or practicing mindfulness, how they gradually turn into a more mindful way of being in the end. So as a characteristic. And to examine this, we followed people during an 8-week socio-emotional competence training. And each week we asked them how mindful they felt in their everyday life on a weekly basis. And also asked them to give us an understanding of how they generally perceive themselves on their characteristics of mindfulness and self-compassion before 4 weeks into the training and after the training. And this is very basic intervention research, asking people to report on how they're feeling during and after the training. And other researchers have already looked at that specifically for mindfulness. So they have done this traditional mindfulness-based stress reduction training and then ask people weekly, and they see a weekly increase in mindfulness throughout the MBSR training. And also that this weekly increase predicted increases in the trait, in the stable characteristic of mindfulness. But here's the twist, what we did differently in our study. As I said, we did this in the socio-emotional competence training, and we tried to avoid labeling our exercises as mindfulness exercises because we were interested in really showing, is it mindfulness that predicts mindfulness, or might it be something different that enhances these traits or plays a role in trait development? So we used mindfulness practices, but never really said that. So we said to scan the body or to focus the attention on the breath, which is commonly associated with mindfulness or meditation, but we explicitly tried not to mention mindfulness or meditation. And then what we found was super interesting because people did not, they increased in the weekly mindfulness and they increased in the long-term mindfulness, but we didn't see this association between these weekly increases and the trait increases. So in other words, when you take the mindfulness labeling away, we don't see these associations between state and trait experiences anymore.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because this is the exact piece that I wanted to explore is this idea of how we characterize what we're doing can bring with it biases, preconceived notions, ideas, and even some subtle goal setting about
Hmm.
what participants should have as outcomes. And what we're
Hmm.
seeing here is by not using or avoiding as much as we can use of the word mindfulness, that has an impact. And I
Hmm.
wonder if you'd say a little bit more about this, which is part of the paper, is that there are certainly effects of an increase in what we would consider mindfulness kinds of effects, but not that direct tie. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more of that from the state to trait and what the difference is here and what are some of the causes you were thinking that might come from that.
Hmm. That's a super interesting question. And we also only have hypotheses based on what we did. But one thing is that creating this kind of expectancy. So if we tell people we're practicing mindfulness and this is what mindfulness is, and this is what mindfulness does, and this is how it works, we also create this expectancy of when we ask people, and did you experience this now? They might be more likely to report, yes, this is exactly what I'm experiencing. And if we take this part away and focus on other things, we did a lot of self-reflection on stressful moments and how people deal with these moments, which we can do frame in a mindfulness labeling or not, and then ask them did your mindfulness develop? Maybe the focus is not there and they perceive it in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this is the interesting aspect of how we nourish the the garden or poison the water, however we want to look at it, is by establishing a here's what this is, here's what we're doing, here's what you should feel. This is the value of science, is that we have the
Mm,
opportunity to blind these effects and not be clear, not to misrepresent things or to mislead people, but to clarify, is it just our expectations around what should be happening that may be causing the effects that we're seeing? What I'm wondering about with this is, if I'm recalling correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, that there were increases in the temporary, the state mindfulness, and then the trait mindfulness. Did that also go up when people were reporting? And kind of what's the relationship between those two? How
mhm.
did that part work?
Hmm. So, as I said in the beginning, we usually think if we want to increase a longer lasting skill or a trait, we think this is be like that this is helpful that we engage in behavior or experiences certain states that represent this behavior. So, the temporary mindfulness we think should lead to this longer term perceiving oneself as a mindful person. And we try to understand through which processes this happens. So there's a theory that says if you experience more states because you're practicing mindfulness, then you should also interpret this in terms of becoming a more mindful person. And we saw that in previous research where we had this traditional MBSR trainings, but we didn't see it in ours. So we did see the temporary increase. So with the 8 weeks, people got more mindful and in weekly mindfulness measuring terms. And they also perceived themselves to have a more mindful general tendency, so the trait. And we thought, well, if they increase over the weeks and they also increase in their behavior or in their general tendency, this should be somehow associated. So if people practice it, it should translate into the behavior, but we couldn't find this without the mindfulness labeling. And this is what it really surprised us. And we're still trying to make sense of this finding. For example, do people need this explicit labeling? Should we tell them, hey, this is the training and this is what we're training and this is what should come out of it? Or is it in science you can or in research you can never exclude it? Is it that we measured it in a kind of way that didn't make sense to people? Or was it just that the focus of the training was different? I said it was a socio-emotional competence training, and we focused a lot on personality development, so emotional stability or behaving more extroverted. So maybe the focus was just not on mindfulness. So maybe people were distracted or weren't really aware of that these practices also enhance mindfulness. So they didn't kind of couple this state experience with the trait change.
It's so interesting because the implications for this as mindfulness becomes more part of society, as it becomes more mainstream, many of us are looking for ways we can still continue to embed this because we see the effects, we see how it is helpful. And some of that may be, how do we frame this in ways that people who may be aversive to mindfulness through misunderstanding what we're doing, if we
Hmm.
use terms about it that are ones that are they can be more receptive to, the implications on this kind of research around framing can make a very big difference. So I'm curious for you, you just mentioned there are so many things that we don't understand and need to do more research on some of these effects. What are some of your thoughts about some of the implications here, and what would you like to see as more research around this?
Hmm. That is a very good question. And I think expectancy effects, or that we expect people, if we tell them, hey, this is what we're trying to teach you and this is what comes out of it, I think that is a good thing and we should be more aware of this. We can call it expectancy effect. We can call it self-fulfilling prophecy, so that we tell this is going to happen and it happens. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. What I would like to see more is trying to really figure out what the specific effects of mindfulness or self-compassion, for example, is, as opposed to what we can actually see. Because we also see that through therapy, for example, mindfulness increases. And some therapists might use mindfulness techniques and others don't. And still, there's this increase in mindfulness. And in my eyes, it would make sense to understand what are more common factors. And I think research is already there, like common factors in change, in trait change, in personality change, but really making a difference and identifying when is mindfulness specifically helpful. What is the target group that would specifically benefit more from mindfulness than from classic cognitive behavioral therapy or from physical exercise. So really understanding when should we give which in intervention, and when does what approach make most sense. And I think we're only getting started with that. And I mean, we now have large language models. We now have great algorithms where prediction becomes easier and handling a lot of data becomes easier. So my hope would be that we can at some point in the future predict, okay, this person brings these characteristics, and it makes total sense that this person should practice mindfulness, or that this person should do physical exercise, or that this person goes to therapy. That would be my wish.
Yeah. And it's so insightful around it's not just one thing, it's around the appropriate thing, intervention, whatever it happens to be,
Mhm.
for what they're encountering. If I have a particular mental health challenge, it may not be a general, here, take this same old program that everyone's taken. It may be, no, these are the specific practices that would be most helpful to you based on the
Mhm.
research. And your individual mileage may vary. I say that quite often, that we'll need to adjust and be aware over time, like finding the right medications for a particular problem.
Mhm.
And if I have a toothache, does doing a focused attention practice make sense? Maybe, maybe not. So the
Mhm.
details are going to be
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
interesting. And I ask just one final question for you is what are some things that coming from this research and other research within the field of mindfulness and self-compassion that you feel maybe we're still missing? And there are some tremendous opportunities for us to do more work on. Have you had any thoughts about some of that?
Mhm. I think I already kind of alluded to this. So the specificity. So when is it really? I think we have to go back a bit, and we see that in research, fortunately. So doing research on what exactly is mindfulness in our understanding in this Western research world or in this Western popular world, and where does it come from, and what are we actually measuring also with the instruments we have. So a bit more groundwork is needed. And then this very specific, if we have a better understanding for whom will it be beneficial and who will maybe benefit from something else more. So not seeing this as a competition of this is the new it and we all have to do it, but to really understand this specificity. When is it helpful? When it is specifically indicated to practice it, and I think it would make sense to go more into that.
Completely agree. There's so much yet to be understood about this, and especially how it can help people. So, for those who are watching or listening, I do encourage you to check out the links that I have for this episode. The paper we've been talking about is full access, so you can look at the whole thing. And I've also got a link for Kira's other work there as well. And there's some fascinating research within that. Our guest today, Kira Borgdorf, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Chad, for having me.
Thanks so much for watching today, and please do, if you got something out of this, tap on that subscribe button. It does help other people to find this as well. And remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. And I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.